Shemai, how are you?
Good.
Good.
I'm just a bit concerned that you're called Caroline, Pete.
Oh no, come on.
I'd say usual old trick. If everybody goes to Gareth's picture and the three little dots, click on it and pin it.
Yeah.
I'm having problems with my laptop here for some reason.
Oh.
There we go.
There
That's going. So
lovely boy.
over to you guys.
Cool.
Once again, thanks for stepping in tonight.
Yeah, no worries. It was only fair a Welsh boy steps in for Mr. Slaney, innit? So not that I can do his flies justice, but yeah, thanks for having me again. Yeah, it's strange time of year, isn't it, really? Because we've gone from sort of winter conditions about 6 weeks ago to like dog days of summer almost. The river's stupid low. We haven't had rain since what, February probably. We did have some night before last, but that raised the river where I'm headed on the weekend by 0.5 centimetre. So needless to say, I don't think it's going to be coloured up. So but a couple of one good question from Peter in the WhatsApp group. So biggest thanks for that, Pete. We'll definitely cover that today. So for a bit of background, I'm going away on one of our annual fishing weekends. I say fishing weekend, it's a knees up, right, with some fishing in and around it. But obviously for the last couple of years, we haven't been able to do it because of COVID. So this is going to be the first one since 2019, I think. So it's on the River Monnow, which is a tributary of the River Wye in Wales. And it's just great, right? So the Monnow Rivers Association are a charity, all volunteers, all like a box of frogs. They're all batshit, if I could say that, excuse the language. And top guys. Quite a few were involved with the Wild Trout Trust as well. And really they started it as simply a conservation stroke habitat improvement group that put all the money back into the Monnow. Likewise, all the funds raised from the weekends that we go on go back in as well. So for 100 and a bit quid for 2 days of camping, some meals thrown in, all the fishing, that's not bad. And usually we get about 30 guys there. So some are brand new to fishing, some have been doing it for a long time, but there's no egos there. If there are, then, well, they'll be chewed and spat out, really, which is good, right? You don't want any of those guys. So it's a good group. I think I've been going since it started in 2006 or 7, something like that. And as I say, top bunch. So really, all the flies I'm doing this week, not that my fly boxes are short, but I'm short in a couple of patterns. So really, the flies I'll focus on tonight are quick and easy to tie. So they're great to do before, you know, trips away or even weekends or the next days, things like that. For this time of year, they're quite subtle, I suppose, in what they represent. I mean, as I say, we've gone from 6 weeks ago, we had the start of March Browns, Granham, all that nice stuff. They've sort of, their party's finished now. So we've still got 1 or 2 large darks on the water, large brook duns are now in, yellow maize. And last weekend I saw my first couple of Danica as well, which is great. However, and I think it's a mix of issues. We've obviously got horrendously low levels at the moment. Waters are around, depending on where I'm fishing, about 12 to 14 degrees. They're not up into that gold spot just yet. And we've got some algae issues as well, starting to bloom as well. So it's an early problem this year. But the hatches I'm seeing on both the Usk and the Monnow are, yeah, we're seeing a range of invertebrates, but not, you know, in any number really to really get the fish going, I've found anyway. And those rising fish that I am finding seem to be locked on midge or something. Like literally, we were watching 1, 2, 3 fish rise on the Usk last weekend, and they were taking just an inch or 2 below the surface. So we tried all sorts, very small nymphs, spiders, but they just, I don't know what it was. But yeah, Peter, you mentioned that I'm always successful when I go out. No, it's don't believe what you see on social media. So it's been a decent season so far, but as I say, conditions are a bit low. We've got another warm weekend coming in. Still no water, even after the little bit of downpour we had, which was laughable, really, the couple of nights ago. Yeah, so fish are really, you know, sitting in low water, crystal clear. You can see you coming a mile off, and I'm pretty much down on my knees wearing my brush cutter pads at the moment these days, trying to keep as low as I can. And it does result in a couple of fish. So regardless of pattern, as I said, so I'll go back to what I've said when I've been with you guys in the past. I try to keep things simple, right? All I've done today is talk about the network designs and diagrams. When I come to time flies, let's keep things nice and simple, have a bit of fun, and hopefully it'll end up catching fish. Likewise, as I said, weekend of fishing coming up, so I like to keep things simple. I want to spend my time on the water, not behind this thing here, the vice. So as long as the patterns I tie are representative, so again, if we go back to that GIS, so general impression of shape and size, you know, we're not looking to, well, I'm not anyway, I'm not looking to imitate specific invertebrates. Danica time I will, of course, but for the most part, I'm not too bothered. Color, I'm not a big believer in it. If you are, cool, but it's my personal thing. Shape, silhouette, size, great. To me, color slightly secondary. So 3 patterns tonight, and then what I thought we'd do is a bit different, is have a chat around how I tackle, how I go out. It's a personal thing again, right? So again, if you've got your own experiences, chuck them in, because I can learn as well. I certainly don't know everything, like all of us. And I'm eager, right? So in and around work, in and around life, fishing always tries to come in as pole position in my life. So if I can learn something, I'm still mad keen for it. Yeah, no day's a dull day when it comes to fishing, right? We've always got something to learn. So we'll come on to how I approach things, what's in my day pack, flies, yeah, cool, we can talk about that as well. So 3 flies today, they're nice and simple. The first one, we've kind of, I think some of you have seen before, but actually we'll do that second, because that's a bit of an easier one. So this first one then, all of these patterns are either, and I think I posted on Facebook recently, they're either 2 ingredients or less, just to keep things simple, right? And again, you can bash these out like nothing. So the first one then is, you probably all heard of the Cdc elk. So that was designed by Hans Weilenmann, Danish chap, 80s, 90s. And again, he's sort of over the years designed another couple based on the same materials, to imitate different stages of invertebrates, right? Or even caddis, right? So we're talking Cdc and elk, but this one's a cripple. And I kind of see it as not just a cripple, but also an emerger as well. So let me switch screens. And to be honest, this has probably done the best bit of justice all year. So let me just stick a hook in the vise. So what we're looking for is a curved grub hook, nothing too thick that it sort of drags the fly under. We still want a fairly light gauge wire. And again, I'm just going to use my standard nano silk, right? So this, again, any color, we're not going to use this or incorporate the color of the thread into the fly at all. So, and again, this kind of disappears to nothing, right? So we're going to work with 2 ingredients, as I said, 2 or less, and the last one we'll do is actually got 1 ingredient. So see, it's the easiest of the easy. Excuse me while I wet the whistle. So first ingredient is CDC. So this is going to be for the body. So I'm just going to take my thread down to the curve, and I'm just going to reposition slightly in the vise. 2 seconds. Let me see if I can sharpen that up. The way. That's about it. Does that look okay to you?
Aye.
Cool. Oh, hey, Gav. All right.
Yeah, man, how are you?
Can't even see on the screen. I recognise that voice. Right. So we're just going to grab a CDC feather. Nothing massively long. Here we go. I'll do. So like the adult CDC and elk represents adult caddis, right? So you got a nice sort of triangular wing, nice sedge pattern, right? And it's, again, a nice easy pattern to tie. And you can kind of run up a load of them quite simply, or quite quickly rather. So just like the CDC and elk, right? I'm going to put the feather in, and then I'm going to draw it all the way back. So we've just got a tiny tag showing. So I'm going to do once over, nice firm upward pull of pressure. Then I'm going to go underneath, nice lock-in wrap, and then over the top and tie in all the way forward. So again, you get very little bulk on the end, and you're tying it into the tip so you can use, you know, the maximum length of that feather then. Also the idea goes. Then I'll take my hackle pliers, and I'm just gonna start to use this to form the body, right? So I'm just going to wind this forward in sort of overlapping slightly turns. And as I start coming forward, you'll notice I start getting these scraggly bits, which is great. So much like a hackle, what we want to do, we want to use those and incorporate these into the body, right? So I'm just going to stroke them back. You notice that I haven't got many at this stage. As we start winding up, you'll notice the scraggly bits start to stick out, which is what we want. It's a nice sort of noisy pattern, this.
Gives it a bit of life.
Yeah, big time, yeah. So the last pattern I'm going to tie tonight is as subtle as they come, right? There's not a huge amount of movement to it. So for slacker water, the last pattern we're going to do is going to be great. But for sometimes a little bit noisier water, or also, I suppose, if you're imitating stuff like maybe a large Brook Dun emerger, then you've got a lot of mess going on here and a bigger footprint, right? But still with only two materials. So I'm just going to tight wrap over, and I'm just going to take a bit of, remove my hackle pliers and locking wrap in front. And I'm just going to park it with 2 turns. And again, the nano silk's great, right? Doesn't really bulk up. So that's all good there. So just snip that off. Right, so you can see here, I've got a couple of choices now. Let me just, I'm going to put some deer hair on the front of this. So I just want to lock this in. I don't want any pressure coming off. Let me just do a quick whip there. So what we got is quite a noisy sort of looking pattern here, right? That's going to give loads of like movement. It's going to give loads of, well, it'll add slightly to buoyancy as well. But to be fair, the body does become quite wet, right? That's not our main sort of buoyancy material, even though it's CDC. When I fish it, I don't grease the body up. And you'll see next now, we're going to have a CDC wing, which is tied in reverse. And that's going to have, that's going to give us the main bit of buoyancy, right? So what I want this to sort of impart a bit of movement, but only from underneath, right? The sides, the top, and you'll see why this might be a bit easier in a second. I'm just going to snip off. It doesn't matter if you do or you don't, but you'll see why why we don't care about that top bit in a sec. You don't have to do this, but you'll see why in a second. If some of the fibers are too long, cool. I don't like cutting CDC because I think it looks a bit too, what's the word? It's a bit square. Yeah. And what you can do is just pick it up like that and just pinch it off, right? Like you could do with marabou. To make things a bit more natural looking, rather than a square cut like hairdresser and go in and, you know, feather it. Also like a hairdresser, I suppose. So next one, deer hair. I said these 3 are going to be quick patterns, right? We'll use the time with the discussion later. So I've got some deer hair, which is probably not the best there. This one is specifically, doesn't really matter, but this is a Comparadun deer hair, so it's quite fine in the hair fibers. So it's a little bit lighter. So I'm gonna make some noise in a minute now by tapping. So I'm gonna take a pinch out, And what I tend to do is I go in with my scissor points and just work out how much I want. You can't see this on the video, unfortunately, but I'll come back to you in a moment while I practice. So I've got a pinch, and as you know, first thing we're going to do is remove that under fur. Just give it a couple of blows. Again, that's going to make things a bit easier stacking wise. All right, so I've got a nice little cut. If it looks a bit too thick, you can remove some. I always stack all of my hair. This is the one fly or pattern, or rather the one material I'm not allowed in the house to tie past like 9:30 because of all the banging and waking the neighbours, right? So Mrs. always shouts up, but she's not in tonight, so we can do what we want. That's all we need. And just like magic, you got nice line tips, right? So I'm going to take it out tips facing forward because this is going to be a forward facing wing, like a cripple, right? It's not going to go over the body like an adult caddis. It hasn't got to that point yet. So as I say, Hans calls it a cripple, but I use them more as an emerger. All right. So what I tend to do for consistency, just measure it, length of the hook or length of the body in this case, right? And then just align. You can go a bit longer if you want a heavier, sort of longer wing, but that about does it. So I'm just going to do a loose wrap over as normal with the Hare, right? And then I'm going to pull up because I'm using GSP again. I'm not going to do a super tight wrap because that's just going to cut through the lot. 1, 2, and I'm just going to brush the whole lot up. Three there, and just keeping the pressure on. Again, I'm just going to get everything out of the way. Just do how we finish. Again, we're not looking to form a head or anything, right? So just get it tied off, get it secured. Nice and easy. Okay, so now we got the messy bit. So as I say, we need to trim kind of like a, like your normal head, I suppose, if this was a caddis adult. Now, I prefer to tie mine like this without cutting them first, because on all my caddis flies, I like to do that. One, if I was tying an adult caddis, that would be doable if I was to trim the head. But on this time around, you'd be pinching it by your fingers by such a small amount of area that you wouldn't really be able to do it anyway. So I'm just going to part this now because it's the opposite way around. It can be a bit fiddly. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to do a couple of cuts. And this is why I trim the CDC first, because you're always going to catch some otherwise. And this just proves that what we want is the CDC hackle or the CDC fibers at the side. Don't really care about the ones on top. So I'm just looking to form a sort of uniform head without creating too many lumps and bumps. And again, that also gives it a bit of buoyancy, right? Because these fibers are quite, not quite, they are totally hollow, right? So they do hold air, like straws, I suppose, you drink out of. So I'm just going to part the CDC, just bring that back. That's what we want it to do. We want it to float backwards or point backwards. Okay, so essentially what we've got there, might look a bit of a mess. Let me take that one off. Is a cripple, okay, but a CDC and elk tied in reverse essentially. And that gives one hell of an awesome footprint. So the start of the year, when Granham were coming off, you can mess around with Granham patterns and things if you want to, but this was all I was using and it did the job perfectly. Quick, easy, like super easy to tie. And you can bash a dozen of these out in 20 minutes, half an hour, because I'm far from the fastest tire. I never have been a quick tire. But it's a pattern that just does the job And granted, it is a little prone to, you get a trout to sort of nick the body, and the body can unwrap. But, so what? You caught a couple of fish on it, keep the hook if you want to, whack it back in your box, retie it when you get home, away you go. 2 materials, and cheap materials as well. This is the thing. So if you like saving money and catching trout, this is certainly one for you, right? So again, this is probably, this season anyway, the most productive fly all season so far. And we'll come on to the next 2 in a moment as well. So any questions on that fly?
Oh yeah. For me, a question developed itself between deer hair and elk hair. What's the difference? What's the option to use?
Good. Yeah, top question. So the pattern itself is called the CDC and elk, right? Let me switch videos so you can actually see me when I'm talking. So yeah, the pattern's actually called the CDC and elk, but Hans actually uses deer. So whether, I'd have to dig out the link. I think he did say years back that he prefers the finer fibers from a deer rather than elk, which can be a little bit thicker and sometimes more coarse. And it certainly does it for me anyway. I mean, if it was a larger pattern, then I've used elk because it's a bit more, there's a bit more to it. Whereas with deer, it can be a little bit finer. So on smaller patterns, even deer can go down quite nicely to an extent, right? It's got a cut off point, I suppose. Well, I think anyway. But yeah, top question. Personal preference, I think. I think he decided to use deer instead of elk, and yeah, it should be the CDC and deer, but the name's stuck.
Yeah, you get coastal deer that got finer hairs, haven't they?
Yeah, and
like
certainly
the deer that live in the mountains are really, really thick, like a red deer, really thick hair.
Yeah.
Minefield.
Yeah, it is a minefield, and you've got like comparadons and it's just a name for a region probably, or whoever's shot the thing. But the comparadon stuff is quite very fine indeed, so that can go down to quite small patterns as well.
Okay, so you're using finally the deer hair for smaller flies and the elk for bigger ones, or?
I don't, and that's only because I'm lazy. So I've got a patch, and regardless of size, if I want a really big fly, then yeah, I suppose I could. Yeah, I could use like maybe a more coarser deer or elk hair, but for the most part, whatever's on the desk, this does it. I usually fish size 16s, 18s, that sort of thing anyway, and that just does it all. So
whatever's in front of you.
Yeah, whatever's there.
Yeah, for me in Germany, it's hard to get deer. Deer is very well known here, but the elk hair, it's very hard to get. So
there you go. Works out perfectly for you then. Good. So we talked about a kind of cut off in where deer can be used for like wings and things, because you can use it. I've tied it down to, and I think we did it with this group in the past, where we did like microflies, and I think we went down to like a 22, and that was a CDC and elk, and it did kind of push the balance of where where deer becomes sometimes a bit too cumbersome. Yeah, of course, maybe a bit too much bulk. And as we talked about, it's using the right materials for the right like size or the right pattern. So it can go down pretty nice, but in size 24s, 26s, you're using what, like 4 or 5 fibers, and it just gets a bit silly then when you're having to count out fibers. So that's where your CDCs come in and things like that, which are a bit more favoursome to smaller patterns, I suppose. So the next one, we'll go back to the first one I was going to do, and this is more the Snowshoe Hare emerger. So we're still staying on 2 materials. So this is excluding the thread, right? So we're going to go a bit, what was that? So that was a size 14. We'll go a size 16 on this one. And again, this is another one that's doing the job in certain situations at the moment. So I've tried this one with you before, but I'll show you, I've started doing a couple of other similar things, make it a little bit easier. So let me just flip over to, no, not that one. Too many cameras. Right. So again, same as, we're gonna just enter the thread. And so I'm there 2 seconds, got a bit of a fray, which is rare for this stuff.
That happens.
Even on GSP. So whack the thread on. I'm going to lay a bit of a base for this one because we're going to tie over the top and I don't want it twisting. And obviously GSP is a little bit slippery anyway, right? So yeah, lay it. And now what I want to do is, this one's the Snowshoe Hare emerger. Now Bob Wyatt, again, that was his pattern, so it's not certainly one of mine. Nothing is, right? They're all copies of copies. I had a bit of a chat with Bob around this one. So if you have a look in his trout hunting book or What Trout Want, both are very, very good. Turn my fishing around. So if you're looking for book recommendations, then grab those two. Trout hunting, I think, is a bit rarer these days. Certainly What Trout Want, that's standard price on Amazon. Some awesome tips. And again, he's man after my heart, really, with the whole presentation of a pattern and all that nice stuff. So one thing I used to do when I tied these, I tie the snowshoe in at the very front, right? And he sort of reached out on Facebook, of all things. I'm glad he didn't call me out on public, and he was like, yeah, nice fly. However, it's not how I designed it to sit, right? The wing is supposed to be quite far back because the body is supposed to be in the film rather than, if you think of a shuttlecock, which is more like that then, right? Or even vertical sometimes. So Derek, those patterns last night, awesome, right? Great midge emergers, things like that. But this can imitate, any sort of invertebrate or caddis, which is sort of sat right in the film, the whole body I'm talking. And again, in his book, he sort of images that with some photographs where the whole fly is pretty much in the film, right? Big sort of silhouette, a lot of food in there. And this is kind of one of his sort of template patterns that he uses regardless of what's hatching, right? It kind of does it all. So it's quite far back. I'm going to come forward another wrap. So again, for this one, we're using Snowshoe, rabbit foot. Let me just, one thing we talked about before is, so obviously you get the foot, right? And there's the pads at the front, and we chop it straight down the middle, bang, right? You got half a foot. It just makes it easier to get to the, sorry, can you see that? No. So it makes it easier to get to the sweet spot in the middle. It's a bit like that, but in the middle, you've got a kind of a mix of the really coarse fibers on the front and back. And in the middle, you've got kind of a nice bit of under fur as well, which obviously this is the bottom of the foot, right? All that is naturally sort of water resistant. Okay, so that's going to give us the buoyancy. Everything else on the pattern, we want it to sink. I'll come on to that. So it's kind of important what we use for the body and how much, because we don't want it to sink like a rock. We want it to sit just perfectly, so, or as perfectly as we can. There's nothing's that perfect, is it? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go in again with scissors, which I have put over there. Okay. And I'm just looking for a mix. We don't want a lot with this, as we discussed before. So I'm just going to grab a pinch and snip. Now, when you snip it, it comes out and there's loads going on here, right? And that's a decent amount. So we've got loads of guard, or we class them as guard sort of fibers here. So I'm just going to clean that up. because I don't want it going crazy. Now you can trim these, right? I'm not of a thou shalt not trim. CDC, I don't trim. I just like the way it looks when it's neatly stacked and things, and that's just a personal thing, right? But this I will trim, because sometimes if it's too long and to get that all the same length is nigh on impossible, right? You can do your best to sort of give a good sort of balance, but sometimes it just can't be done because maybe you got, you know, bad foot, or there's too many guard fibers or whatever. So that'll do. I'm just going to marry it up, give it a bit of a, yeah, that'll do. Again, same length as the body type thing, right? Again, consistency always looks nice when somebody opens your box and go, ooh, they look pretty. So again, tight pull up, tight pull up, tight pull up, and just give it a couple of turns. So this is gonna look a mess until I trim this at the very end, right? So again, I'm just gonna tie my thread on there. The bulk bit at the end, we're gonna cut. The last time I tied it on at the end. So this is just to show you can do it both versions, right? Bob started doing it this way, then he changed his mind. So if the creator of the fly can change his mind, or, you know, do things vice versa, then, you know, we can do, us mere mortals, we can do what we want. So I'm just gonna go with my scissor tips, and I'm just going to cut at an angle because we want to, well, I want to anyway, taper the body, and you can see that starts to look okayish there. So I'm just going to move this slightly. For the body, now technically I said this is two materials. Technically it's not. Is one, because I've got this stuff, snowshoe rabbit foot dubbin. There we go. So technically we're just using one material, so there's a caveat there. Color, as I said, I don't care, use whatever you got. Natural snowshoe rabbit foot dubbin, more like a hare's fur, cool, use it. This is calibetis, so it's like a hare's ear light olive type mix. Again, whatever's on your desk. Important thing with this one is I don't want to dub it too heavily, right? Because although I want it to sit in a film, I don't want it sink in every go. We'll talk about how they're fished in a bit and how they're prepped, but we'll come to that. So I'm not going to go crazy. So a quick dubbing rope, and again, I'm not worried too much about the base because I'm going to come back to this. The body gets a bit too thick, tighten it up. Touch and turns. Again, if there's any lumps, bumps, you can sort those out as you go. So we're going to come up maybe 2 wraps short of the wing, and then I'm going to tighten everything up really, 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 really tight. Any wing bits, get out of the way. And then tightened up, I'm going to go right back down. There, just short of the bend. And then I'm going to tighten everything up even further by using my thread now as a rib. So nice open turns. This isn't for the benefit of the fish or the benefit of us. It's to make sure that our body's like super tight. So you could also use stuff like super fine dubbing. That's another option. But again, for simplicity of 2 or less ingredients, then I'm just using the same dubbing throughout. So next thing I'm going to do is, now this might go out of focus a second, but I just want to turn this in the vise and just, again, I want this sitting in the film, right? I don't want it on the film. So any spiky bits we've got is going to prevent that. So I'm just going to make sure that they're trimmed off. And that'll do. Okay. So again, you can kind of see the bit of rib there, the thread, but again, it's not for that, as it says, it's just to make sure things are nice and tight. Right. So I'm not tying this like a a shuttlecock. We need to kick that wing up now. So what I'm going to do is take some more of this dubbing. Again, same dubbing, right? There's some guard fibers and stuff like that in there as well. So get your dubbing needle and just unspin anti-clockwise your thread until that starts to open up. And you can test that just by rubbing your needle back and forth, right? And it starts to lay flat. And when it does, without stabbing yourself in the finger, just do a split thread. And then I'm going to just pinch off some of my same dubbing, not in massive wads, and just start feeding it up into a section. Let me get another bit here. As with any fishing weekend, there's always a mate that says, "Oh, I haven't had any time to make flies this weekend, or this week in readiness. So that's all I've been doing is making flies for friends."
Yeah, when you get a little reputation, that happens, yeah.
Yeah, I did say no for a while, and then they promised me some beer, and as we all know, I'm a sucker for beer, so my hands are a bit. Let me bear with. Try. So what we're particularly looking for, where you can, is maybe some of the guard stuff, right? The nice spiky stuff. Squirrel works quite nice with this as well, but for this pattern, it tends to go a bit too spiky. Again, we're just looking to create a thorax, right? So let me check that down there. So once you got the length, this is about inch and a bit. And again, you can always add on, right? So that's not a problem. You just unspin again and add some more in, right? So what I'm doing now, I'm spinning back clockwise. And you can see, hopefully, that that's starting to twist nicely. That's going to give us the nice sort of vertical fibers, right? So as I say, we left some space just behind the wing. So I'm just going to start there and give it a couple of wraps. I'm just going to brush back those fibers because we want to use those. A couple of wraps there. Then I'm going to pull the whole lot back, and then I'm going to do some tight, really tight turns in front to really kick that wing up, right? And then brush everything back as I go. Come forward. Now, as I said, let's just unspin a little bit more because I want to add some more back in. And again, back in with my needle. Till you find that sweet spot. And get in with your needle again. So we don't need much more in this one because we're almost done, but I don't want any empty spots at the front. There we go. Lovely. Spin back. So again, if you're not talking through this pattern, it can be quite quick, right? But you have to take my word for it. If you're not chatty like me, then you can bash them out. So again, I just go back in, brush back as you go, because we're incorporating those legs. We want to tie on top of the legs. Kind of want that thorax nice and messy, right? We're just going to do one thing there. So again, I'm going to whip finish in a second, but I don't want to whip finish with like all this pressure on the thread, right? So again, I just want to take that pressure off by unwinding. So it doesn't look the best. It's a bit noisy on the camera in a minute, but we're going to tidy that up in a second. Okay. So just brush everything out of the way. And again, I'm not looking to form a head, right? I just want to give it 5-6 turns for a whip finish and then go in on my scissors. So the tidy up bit, there's a fair bit to do there. I'm happy with the body, right? Because we want that to punch through. Everything else, you can see that's messy. So when we talked about earlier, where I want this to sit in the film, that's not going to happen like that, right? Because all of this stuff down here is just going to prevent that, right? So what I want to do, I just want to brush this forward. The wing will sort out as well, because again, there's a lot of guard stuff in there. But I want to just pick out everything, right? So the top and the sides, I want to focus on. And when I say the top, I mean the upward facing fibers. Go to town on those. And what actually else, so given a nice dubbing brush, some of you might have seen this, it's like this thing, really short, and you can really get in there and brush things up. And again, I'm brushing up, right? I don't care about those fibers pointing down. I'll come to those in a sec. So the wing is fine at the moment, but what I want to do now is trim. Okay, so I'm just going to move this slightly. So I'll bring it back in the vise in a second. So again, the whole point of this fly is to get that body in the surface, right? There we go. So I got nothing underneath. Okay, so that's going to sit much better and how I want it to now. And then finally, just move that slightly. All right, so I want the wing about the same length as the body. So what I can do is just pull all that up, and just like a hairdresser does, never go in and cut like that, because it'll just, well, probably going to do the same job, but it's going to look horrible. I want to cut down. You know, gents, when we've all been to the hairdressers and you have a nice feathered hair at the very end.
No.
Yeah, same, Gav, same. Those days are long gone with me.
Oh, yeah.
And just go in vertically, right? So you can vary the wing length. I'm not gonna spend too much time on it, but you can vary it as much as you want, right? But essentially what we want that body and thorax almost sitting like, say that's the water level. We kind of want about, let me just move that. We want as much of that body in the water, right? The rest of it is giving buoyancy and almost a sight indicator as well. So you can see these from quite a distance. Now, from a fishing perspective, I will treat it, right? So I use, where is it? We'll go through this in a bit. So this stuff, Loxa, right? It's like kind of like your ginks, things like that, but it's almost like water. It's so thin. It you know, if you tip it upside down, the whole lock can sometimes run out. So it's not like a gel as such, but a tiny amount of that on my wing, right? Only the wing. I don't bother with the body because we want that to sink. Tiny bit in the wing. And generally, as I've spoken about in the past, once I've got my rod set up, I'll sit back and wait and watch. And generally within that time, the lock's just sort of really dried in and locked into that fly. And it does float really well, but also it doesn't wash out too easily either. So it does last. So yeah, so there's the second pattern, the snowshoe Hare emerger, or the she. Again, it's none of these are my patterns. This is you know, designed by Bob Wyatt, and I said the two books there, Trout Hunting, sorry, and What Trout Want. And between the two of them, this is mentioned because this started as the deer Hare emerger. So instead of snowshoe, he used deer, like almost like a comparadun-ish. But again, similar sort of body shape. But the snowshoe Hare emerger goes down to very small sizes as well. And because of the colors it comes in, naturally it's like cream. So it's again a good color for maybe, I wouldn't say broken water. You're going to want, you know, maybe a paradun or something like that, or clincamera or something that's very visible. But for most part, you generally pick this out at distance as well. So it's a proper trout catcher, this one. So between those two, yeah, they're a couple of my favorites. So there was that one. Let me just pop that out of the vise. You're doing me a favor, yeah, because I've got a couple of extra flies for the weekend. Right, so the last one is going to be super quick, right? We talked about two patterns. I say super quick, we're going to talk it through, obviously. we've had 2 patterns now with 2 ingredients each, or 2 materials, even though the last one was technically 1 material, right? Just one material was dubbing, the other was the natural foot. Okay, so let me just clean my area up a second, because we're done with all that. So I do love chickens, right? I didn't think I'd say that today or admit to it, but I do. I love chickens, right? If I could buy a t-shirt that says I love chickens, I'd wear it, because I do. The missus looks at me stupid all the time every time we pass a farm and there's a chicken quacking around. There we go. So the whiting stuff, again, I'm just absolutely amazed by the qualities they keep coming out with. And I use a lot of paradons on smaller streams more than anything else, because again, they're so visible at distance. It doesn't matter whether it's like a clink hammer or a true sort of in the surface paradon, something like that, something that's quite low, because you can see the paradon or the para post from hell of a distance, right? Certainly with some of the TM era dry stuff, the polypropylene floating yarns or whatever they're called. Fantastic, really, really awesome, right? But as much as I love chickens, I also love duck. Specifically,
Weirdo.
yeah, absolutely weirdo. I know. I'm glad the missus is out. But I also love ducks as well, right? So there's another t-shirt. If you want to know what to get me for Christmas, there you go, a couple of options. And specifically CDC, right? I think if I had to choose one material, yeah, come on. For me, as a river fly fisherman, for trout, yeah, and grayling to an extent, CDC just does it all, right? And this pattern is just evidence to that, really. So let me just clean all this up. So this is a size 18, and I tie this pattern in, I don't really, not 16s, 18s to 22s maybe. But again, I don't really worry too much about the small sizes too much these days. So this has been around for years as well. So David Southall, I first discovered it through David. It's the CDC IOBO Humpy, or It Ought to Be Outlawed, right? Did I get that right? Or it ought to be banned, sorry. IOBO. No, outlawed, it is right. It ought to be outlawed. One ingredient, I can't remember the name of the chap who initially designed it. Parkinson Park. I'll come back to you. I'll send these images through as well, and a bit about them. And Des, I'll put them on the page if you like. So again, this was yeah, such a simple design. I think if you look at, and I'll include this as well, Hans Weilerman did some photography behind it, as he did for pretty much all of the major flies back in the day. The initial tie-in I thought was a bit, for me, this is the thing, right? For me, it would make my tie-in of this pattern inconsistent every day of the week. So whenever you look at CDC emerges, and I always love when somebody ties, you know, when they fold it back and the thorax covers the CDC, and then they use that as mine are always inconsistent. I love it, all right, but mine always come out and I've never really spent that much time then trying to perfect it, and that's my fault. You know, the more you do something, the better you get at it. But I'm like, I ain't got time for that. I want a quick, I want to be on a river. So yeah, so this one, I do it the way David Southall ties it, which is for me a little easier, right? So I'll send the link for the original tie-in, and he ties in, let me switch cameras. So this is one ingredient, right? We've got the hook, we got the same thread, which I've used throughout. And what I'm going to do is just going to take that on, or enter the thread, sorry. And I'm just going to wind that, tie that in. I'm just going to wind it back to the curve. I'm going to park it there, and then we'll have a bit of a chat to what I'm doing. There we go. Right, now I'll find a CDC feather, right? And this is the thing, one. How cool is that? You can use two if you want. I think I started tying with a couple actually, but then I realized, you know what, don't need them. So we'll just use one. And it's surprising. Right, so this is the thing. This pattern is perfect for the conditions that we've got in the UK at the moment, because the rivers are absolutely on their bones. And sorry, I'm just looking for an appropriate feather. And yeah, it's subtle. It sort of imitates. Somebody asked on Facebook recently, what does it imitate? And I said, anything and everything, or everything and nothing, I actually said. And I think the chap was thinking I was being a bit of a know-it-all, or being a bit facetious, and I honestly wasn't, because it does. It's like the atoms of the dry fly world, well, in the emerger world, I suppose. I've never seen a hatch of atoms, as I've said before, so it's the same with this. So we're going to use one feather pointing back, right? And what I want to kind of do is judge it, because what we're going to do is fold this forward, right? So again, for consistency, what we're going to need to do is sort of measure it double the length, right? So 2 times the hook shank. Sometimes I always get this wrong. Sometimes I always. That's good. That's good. So a couple of wraps, and then what I'll do, yeah.
Proper Welshers.
Sometimes always. So again, if it's not right, then let's pull it back through, right? That's more like it. So I tied it in. I've sort of measured the length, right? Some of it's just out of shot, but I'm going to bring it forward in a minute, so it's not going to matter. So what initially the chap who designed it did, so I take another feather, what he did is tie it in right by the butt, right? And they used that to wrap backwards, or tie it in backwards, but it wasn't really incorporated like a body. You're not getting any major buoyancy from it. So I found David's way of tying it like this a little bit easier, right? So I'm just gonna, again, tie this down coming forward. You can use open wraps if you want. It honestly doesn't matter at all, I don't think. And I'm just going to stop short, just give it a cut, because I don't want anything overhanging the eye. If, like you can see on the camera, I can't actually see those yet. So if you've got any bits hanging off, then don't worry about it. So I'm just going to bring forward. All right. And as I mentioned, what we're going to do, we're going to bring this all forward. But what I want to do is, as I'm bringing it forward, see those little bits start to flay back? Brilliant. Now, the original didn't have those, but David Southall's did. And I'm, you know, they're perfect. They could be a shuck, they could be anything. So what I tend to do is rough that bit up as I'm bringing forward, because I want some of those, and it just looks the part, I find. And then when you're ready, just pinch in place. And again, I don't want to wrap this around the shank, right? As some GSPs can do. So nice gentle loop across the top and then tighten as you come up. Second turn, that's all it needs. And then a lock-in wrap in front. We're not looking to kick it up, but we're looking to lock it in place. And then we'll just tie off in front. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all 4. Right, now this pattern, I swear to God, with the conditions we've got here at the moment, it's just doing it. It's been absolutely the get out of jail, right? So if you've got, like I've got here, a couple of messy bits, you could probably keep them on, because you've got a bit of a shuck going on there. You've got this lovely, let me just remove that a second. You've got this little hump back here, which is just going to hold a bit of air, right? See the underneath there? That's just going to hold a bit of air. And then you've got this wing, like a shuttlecock, that's going to give you the buoyancy and, to a degree, a bit of a sighter. Now, I will admit, on broken water, you're going to be struggling, right? But this isn't designed for that. This is designed for low, calm, glassy glides. And at the moment, the rivers I'm fishing, because they're so low, they're all long, slow, glassy glides, right? It's just where we are. Now, in previous years, this time last year, I've gone back through my fishing diary, the conditions were slightly different. They weren't as low, still had the possibly more broken water. But again, in those situations, this fly will be just, it's designed for that, right? So you got the nice feathers at the back. And what I do, again, using that same floatant, I'll just rub really, I don't bother with the body. I just rub the bits here and then the front wing through that. Let it dry, and it floats like coke. Tippet wise, same as normal. I just use my 6X type stuff, so it's that 3 and a bit pound breaking strain. Yeah, and it for the conditions of the moment between those 3 patterns. So you've got as I say, you've got the IOBO, as it's calling it, again for the slackest, glassiest of waters, you know, where the fish can, well, maybe see you and your fly for a long drift. So they may be inspecting it quite closely, and that works well. As I mentioned, the first one, you've got the CDC in elk, CDC in deer, but tied in reverse as a cripple or an emerger. Again, you've got slightly more mobility with that because of the CDC tied around. So you're starting with the IOBO, which is as subtle as they come. Then you've got a bit more movement, a bit more floatability, and a bit more visibility as well. And then lastly, you've got maybe your invertebrate, as it's right in the film, you've got that snowshoe Hare emerger where, again, that's going to float all day as well. And that can be seen sometimes from quite noisy water as well. And you can vary the colours with that as well, because the snowshoe foot comes in all sorts of colours, right? Duns and pinks, and well, pink doesn't look very nice, if I'm honest. You want to be using some other material for that. The natural sort of stuff looks and plays really nicely there, and nice and well. So between those 3, and again, and this is purely where we are in the UK with the conditions and the weather and the river levels, these 3 flies, they've all I've been using. So I've got these, where is it? I've got one here. So I use these whenever I do auction lots or ties for charity or whatever. I use these little loom boxes. They're tiny, right? There's it's tiny. There's 6 compartments, and I've got for a friend now. Yeah, that's all I tied. He said, "Can you tie me a couple of these and that and this?" And those 3 patterns in a couple of maybe different sizes. That's all. That's the confidence go-to at the moment, I think. So yeah, those are the 3 patterns for this evening. But before we go on to the next bit, any questions about any of the tying tonight?
Okay, how are you going to fish those then, Gareth? Single fly, obviously.
Yeah. So well, I say yeah. So as I mentioned, there was a issue the other night where I mentioned there was a fish feeding just under the surface. Now, left my spider box in the house because I think that would have done it. It's right there on the desk, mocking me. And I think that would have given the presentation that they would have wanted, because the rise forms were almost like you could see the oh Jesus, somebody else, main fin on the back. God,
Adipose.
Dorsal.
Right, sorry, thank you. So dorsal, then adipose, then tail, right? You could see it hump back in. So it wasn't, the mouth wasn't breaking the surface. We were literally stood 15 feet from it, just watching the thing, right? And there were 3 of them in the same pocket. It wasn't the same fish moving around, because these rises, if you call them that, movements of water, were taking place pretty much exactly the same moment, right? So definitely wasn't that. So a spider probably would have worked, because it would have been presented within those top 6 inches maybe. Nymphs, the ones we had were just a bit too heavy. So Peter, back to your question, single presented dry fly in that situation just didn't cut it, and we ended up just leaving and saying, okay, right, well, 1-0 to you, or 3-0 rather, because there were 3 of them. So I always fish single dry fly, not necessarily upstream. Sometimes you've got to be in a position to drift downstream sometimes. The only problem with that is sometimes if you lift straight upstream, you just take it out of his mouth, so pull to the side or try and get that sideward motion. Always single dry though, usually. In terms of makeup then, so you mentioned about like, how do I prepare for either a weekend away or fishing? And generally it doesn't really matter. If it's tomorrow's fishing, I'll do exactly the same thing, regardless of where I'm going. So first thing I always do, and I'm militant about, since my sort of casting instructor days, you'd see guests and clients turn up with fly lines, and the first question I'd usually ask them is, how old is the fly line, what is it, and when did you last clean it? And when you ask somebody when the last time you cleaned a fly line, they just, well, what? What do you mean clean a fly line? I don't need to do that. Yeah, you do. Because river water is pretty disgusting. There's loads of stuff in it. It sticks to your fly line and it stops these ultra slick coated finishes, whatever they're marketed as, right? Super slick. Well, I don't care. That will degrade over time because it's getting dragged through your guides, the eyes on your rod. So that's not really going to make much of a difference, but the stuff will stick to it. So we get all this stuff on the film of the water and it'll stick. And you will see it starts to, the tip starts to drop. Every single fly line I've ever fished will start to dip. So there's a couple of things I do. First of all, before I go fishing, I use these things. So other brands are available, I'll just say, right? But again, there's 30 sheets in there. So what are they? Armor All gloss finish, right? So the stuff you use on your dashboards. Now the missus always laughs because I can't remember the last time I cleaned the inside of my car, yet I spend more time cleaning the fly lines, right? So they don't do anything bad to your fly line. They're designed to gloss coat plastic essentially, right? Which our fly lines are to a degree. Make sure you buy the gloss ones, right? Where is it? Does it say gloss? Gloss finish. Don't get the matte finish, for God's sake, right? Because your fly line won't even shoot at all. You won't get a foot. Pull one out. And again, as I say, there are other alternatives available. As soon as you put fly fishing on these things, it goes up by about 30 quid, right? Yeah. So these do exactly the same job. It's silicon-based stuff you buy. Biodegradable, which is good. So, you're not going to harm the planet and all that stuff as well. And again, you don't need to do the whole fly line because you're not shooting the whole fly line. Certainly I'm not on a river anyway, 20, 30 feet max, a couple of rod lengths, whatever. Then you pull it through. The amount of crap that will come off on these, it'll be a big brown line as you pull it through, and you look at it thinking, my God, why the hell was one, my fly line sinking, and two, why is it not? And you will notice a difference. So that's number one. That's the first thing I always do. Second, I just make sure that my leaders are okay. And again, my leader connection to my fly line, I'm lazy. I looked into like nail knots and nailless knots and pulling them through the core of the fly line. And I'm lazy. I always worry, what if it breaks when I'm in the river? Is something else I've got to take to fix it? So I like a loop-to-loop, this personal thing. I start for fishing, certainly the Usk and the Mono, I start with, hang on, let's go through it. So I use one of these things, a hip pack with a sling over the top. So it's got everything on me, but I don't go in here very often because I also use one of these flip out wader pocket things, right? Which has everything I need, all the end stuff. So first thing you notice, my spools are tippet. I've got a range of from 2x for when I fish streamers, but generally I'm fishing 6x. So I've got a load of streamers, a load of leaders. I like again, this is a personal thing. So I like Rio Power Flex for the leader. And then to the end of that, you'll notice this stuff is, I don't know if you can see it, it's called Supple Flex. So it's a bit more supple, a bit more giving, and it's more closer to your old nylon than it is to copolymer. So the leader itself is quite brutal. Good turnover on it, but I don't want things to land dead straight. I want things to have a bit of slack in it. So that's where the Supple Flex comes in. I've been using that the last few seasons, and it is pretty good. But everyone's got their own favorites with the terminal end, right? So you use whatever you got, whatever you used to. In the front, I have this is a bit weird now, right? Tape measure, right? So if you catch a good fish, you can measure it. Check it aside. I've got a McLean weigh net, but it's never too bang on, put it that way. I'm sure I might have broken it or whatever, but for me, it's not brilliant. Nippers and forceps on the outside, close to my chest, so I can get to them quite quickly. Bar towel, right? So come on to that in a bit, why it's quite handy. Come on to that one next. I do carry 2 fly boxes, right? So the top one has more your full range of paradons, things like that. This one, if you can see it, is more your deer hair and snowshoe. And that one is what I'm using most of. So that's generally in my waders in the front. So I'm going to keep going back in and out. into there. Spare tippet and stuff, certainly for a weekend away. You don't want to be pulling off the last foot of your tippet and going, oh shit, now I've got to use bloody, I don't know, 2x or something for the rest of the weekend. It's not going to do too well. Right, these are basically these. So I've got to the point now where I can't tie without 3x things. The missus always laughs because my eyes look stupid in them, but I don't wear these for you know, fashion. So I started tying with 3 strength plus 3 strength glasses, just because I can be a bit more intricate and I can get in a bit closer, because I am 41 next week and I've had crap eyes forever, right? I'm like -7. I wear contacts, right, by the way. So my eyes are dreadful anyway. So yeah, so another set of them just in case. The moment I start using them on the river is probably going to be the end of, right? So I'm holding off as much as I can. A little tub of flies for a friend, as I said. So you can have those tomorrow. Camera pouch for this camera that I use for my fly tying. All right, so that's the one we've been focusing on with the dries today. And lastly, there's only a couple of more things. Spare set of laces for wading boots. I like this leader holder, right? So you've got all your leaders, yeah, standard stuff. And then there's only one other thing, license holder. So all the clubs, licenses, all that type of stuff. Just in case somebody comes on to me, then I can stab them with a 2-inch blade. It's nothing weird. And that's it. And lastly, Peter, for you, this is probably the heaviest thing in my box. This is a waterproof cigar holder. So
that's a must. That is a must.
There you go. So the beers are in the car, not in you know, in the pack. So,
have you mentioned degreaser sinker? Do you use that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So because I do use that a lot more regularly, right? I don't want to be in and out the bag, right? So that just stays around the back of me. My net's attached to it. And there's a couple of fly boxes that I might need to jump in and out. But to be fair, if I'm switching flies quite often, it's probably because I'm on a tricky fish or something. So that box will be in my front pack, right? So yeah, this flip out tender thing, right? So it flips out and it pretty much lives on the outside of my waders, right? And in here is the stuff I use all the time throughout the day. So a quell by Loon, you can see that, yeah, so gink essentially, right? The good thing about a quell versus gink, and again, this is personal, right? I'm not in cahoots with these guys, Loon, is this doesn't solidify in cold temperatures. So if your fish dries in the winter, this won't, you know, you won't be squeezing the crap out of it. It stays the same, pretty much the same consistency throughout. Then you got that, which I use for CDC and Snowshoe, so the Locksha or the Loxa, which again by Loon, but it's better for CDC. You don't want to be using gels on CDCs because it gets a bit too oily and it just kills them. That stuff is designed for it. I think you've got is it Tiemco something magic, CDC magic, maybe something like that. That's rated quite well too. But again, I've never used it, so that's always this worked for me, and I've stuck to it. Desiccant powder again for CDC. So when it does eventually become waterlogged, let's be honest, everything does, right? We do everything in water. So I fill this up. This was an old Frogs Fanny, I think the brand was, about 15 years ago. But as I mentioned before, look at that. Yeah. Look at that size of my head, right, of desiccant powder. So that is now about there. I bought this about 15 years ago. So if I get another 15 years from it, I'm doing it right. Yeah. So again, these kings, when I bought this 15 years ago, it was £7. I don't know how much they are now because I got that. So again, as I said, this was opened as it passed between states in the US. Then as it left the US, it was opened again. And as it entered the UK, it was opened again. So the amount of stickers from customs on this thing was just bizarre. If anybody tried sniffing it because they suspected it of being a weird white powder, then yeah, I don't envy them that. And then the last couple of things, I don't use it very often, but I've got like this mud stuff. I've never been 100% sold on, you know, degreasing, stuff like that. A couple of years back, I had a chat with Paul Proctor, and he was like, Nah, I'm out every day. Fish see stuff like lines in the thing every
I've
day.
never used it. I've never used it.
No, yeah, and it's just in there as a, well, you know, like when you're on that last fish and he ain't taking anything and you'll try anything,
You've got to try.
that's in there, yeah.
Tungsten. I have used tried tungsten putty.
That would definitely take it down, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it was down, but very
On
very
dries
rare I
though,
ever
or
use it.
on dries or for the
Oh,
dry
yeah.
bit? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
just
Yeah,
very
that's
very
looking
fine.
good.
Very fine.
I mean, I do see the benefit, or you can get the logic of it, right? I mean, it takes it down. You haven't got that tippet showing, but yeah, like I say, well, look at it. It's full. So
Yeah.
there you go. And then the last two, mucilin for the end of the line. Even though I prep it with these things, I will. First thing I do every single outing, when I string the rod up, I grease up the front. I don't know, 4 or 5 feet, and also the first 3 or 4 feet, the butt end of the leader, because I do a lot of spay cast. Even though I'm a single-handed fly fisherman, I use, it could be a snake roll to change direction upstream really quick. I've let my dry fly roll downstream. Something's risen, then you can do a quick snake mend or snake roll, and you're back in the game. And likewise, if it's windy, you might want to do, you know, double spay to keep that, you know, anchor and the line away from yourself. So again, perfect. If you're doing all that, you don't want to be trying to pull up and roll up the end of your fly line, which it doesn't sink because you've already treated it, but this makes it a lot easier because it's on the surface all day, every day. So this is why I do clean the end of my line a lot, because I've greased it as well. So, you know, you're just taking care of it and prepping it as you go. And then the last one, as I mentioned, I'm pretty brutal about keeping a fishing diary as well. I like to look back and what was the level, even the this is silly now, the barometric pressure, right, all that type of stuff, because you can get a rough idea of what the atmosphere was like in terms of weather, just high pressure, low pressure, what the weather was, and we fish a caught, obviously, things like that, and sizes. But most importantly, you might remember last year, certainly with Gwent angling, it got to the point where we, quite similar to this year, we went from a decent winter bang into heat wave sort of conditions, right? And it got to the point where some of our beats were 24 degrees centigrade, which was just horrendous. Now that's no good for a trout or any sort of any salmonid anyway. So we killed fishing for 3 weeks, and we didn't have one complaint. It was brilliant. ISCO, which is just down the map from us, I think they took suit as well. So it was good to see there that everybody was in agreement. Merthyr certainly shut as well. So between the 3 main clubs in that area, bang, no fishing. Our bailiffs were still out, don't get me wrong, but the thing. So this thing, it's a cheap 10 quid thermometer. Turn it on, dip it in the water, it gives me a real instant read as to what the temperature is going to be. Start of the season, it was like you'd expect, 6 degrees, bloody freezing, right? But also I can stick it, in the air. No jokes, not stick it anywhere, but stick it in the air. You get a rough idea of what the temperature is, air temperature, compared to the water as well. So in my fishing diary, right, as I said before, I work in IT. My life is spreadsheets, right? This is what I told somebody the other day. What you do? Spreadsheets, because it's easier for them to, I don't care. So I work in spreadsheets. So when I type in the water temperature, 0 to 16, the background goes green, right? 17, we're getting a bit touchy now. It's getting a bit warm, orange. And 18 to 20, red. And that's about that time. Then I'll probably pick up the phone and phone the guys on the committee and just say, we need to keep an eye on this. And again, if it hits 20 consistently for, a few days, right? If the forecast is the same, we need to be doing something about it. So again, that's and again, it's got this protective thing, right? So I'm not stabbing myself through my waders. It's that lives in the front. And throughout the day, I'll usually, if I'm watching a mate fish or things are a bit quiet and I'm in the water waiting, maybe I'll take a reading and generally get to see what it is. So yeah, all the main stuff in the bag that I infrequently use, and then terminal end just lives there. With the strap that comes down with nippers and forceps. So that's everything I use on day to day.
Very good. What is your go-to make of line that you like using?
So I use a couple. I really like the Barrio stuff. So if you got 2 price points, right? The line is the most right. So this goes back to casting instructor days now. They say, right, what should I spend my money on? Line every single day of the week, right? This is the thing that loads the rod, which enables you to deliver the food bit to the fish, right? You can't do that. Pointless doing it, right? It's just a nice day out on the river otherwise. That is the thing. You could have the most expensive rod in the world. If you put a shit line on it or the bad line or whatever, it ain't gonna load. It's all about
Totally agree. Totally.
Yeah. Bend the line, bend the rod rather, all about load, all that stuff. We talk about loading crap, bending the rod, right? Let's take it back to simples. The best you can buy, in my opinion, there are 2. I haven't used Scientific Anglers for a long time, but I used to use and they were very good. I use Rio a lot now, and to be honest, only because I get guide prices, they're half price. So they're not, for the new elite range, they're like £130 for a line now. Which is like, come on, I know, it's crazy, absolutely mental. I don't know whether the Americans are on more money than us, but relative cost of living is different or whatever, I don't know. But £130 I'd never spend. For £60 that I get, then I do. And the Rio Gold Elite, whatever you want to call it, is for the Usk perfect, because it's a little bit heavier in the head, I find. You can get that distance a bit easier. 2 casts and they're done. Or 2 false casts rather. The Trout, what is it? The Trout presentation, or presentation Trout, or Trout LL, or something like that. That's lovely as well. Nice subtle turnover. But again, it's not so good then for the distance. Or it is, but it's a bit of a lighter line. But also Barrio. So if you want to keep the cost down a bit, still buy a superbly quality line. Barrio GT90, I think, is the one he's got. It's GT, I don't know what the GT stands for, but 90 is the length, standard 90-foot line, right? Quality is superb. He's just changed the production of them because I think the British factory went through or closed or stopped making it, I'm not too sure. But between those, Barrio, if somebody says, what's your price range? And they say 30, 40 quid, Barrio any day of the week. If somebody says, yeah, I've got 100 quid to spend, go Rio. It's as simple as that. And I think Mike Barrio will agree with that anyway. But it's still a quality fishing line. And for 32 quid or something like that, with postage, you really can't go wrong.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then your go-to outfit for the river, what sort of weight line? Weight forward or double taper as well?
I just use weight forwards. I used to use double tapers, the old thing, you can switch them around. Yeah, whatever, doesn't really matter. I think as long as you've got a line that balances the rod and loads the rod properly, that's the main thing. Weight forward for me on a large river like the Usk, then sometimes I want that distance, not all the time. I try and get myself in the position more than cast to it, just because it makes it easier for me, even when I'm lifting line off the water. I don't want to be lifting 60 foot of line off the water, it's just a nightmare. If I can lift 20 foot of line off the water, I'm in connection straight away. So my go-to is a 9-foot 4 weight on that river. On the mono, which is a little bit smaller, same. I use the same leader makeup as well, which is a 12-foot to 6-pound leader, right? And then on the end of that, I put a tippet ring, which is tiny, 1 mil or whatever, which adds 0 weight. And then to that, I put another 3 or 4 foot that I start with. So about 15 foot for the Usk. And because of that, the break-in strain and thickness of the 6-pound break-in strain end, or the terminal end of that leader, I add on 6x to that then, so it continues that nice pressure, I suppose, right? Yeah. The turnover continues, and it does turn over really easily. I like Rio stuff again, as I said, Powerflex stuff. Again, this is all personal preference. I'm not in cahoots with those guys at all. It's what I've used for a long time, and it works. I get a decent price as well, right? So that's it.
Excellent. Can I be your friend?
Well, and then the last of it, which you can see over there, which is ready to go. So I'm on a London work trip tomorrow. So as soon as I get back at 7:30 tomorrow night, I'm legging it in the car. My grab bags are ready to go, and that's waders, rods, boots, reels, that sort of thing.
Well,
but
tight
yeah,
lines.
ready in the car, as I said. So yeah,
tight lines.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
So there we go, chaps. That was really all I had tonight. Any questions at all, or anything we can cover? Otherwise, I'll let you go.
When you're stacking Hare, why do you bang it on the table?
When I'm stacking my A, so I'll bang it on the table, or mat, or my knee, which is ever quietest, so don't wake the missus up. Just to line them up. What do you do?
If you use the heel,
The heel on.
the heel just at the bottom of your thumb. Can you see me on the screen?
I can't. Let me go back to the gallery view. Yeah, I can see you.
There.
Yeah.
Perfect.
There you go.
Done it for years and years and years, and I had the same trouble as you.
Hey, if we get through at the jail with a missus, Gav, then
On there, no noise, you just stand, it comes out perfect.
there we are.
And like I said, that stops then.
Yeah.
Easier life. That's what I'm after. Cheers, Gav.
What poundage did you say you use for your tapered leaders? Use tapered leaders?
Yeah. So the tapered leader itself is 6.4 pound breaking, and then to that, then I add my tippet, which is 6x, which is about 3 and a bit. Early season, I'll use 5x, but trout slamming March Browns and Granham and things. Generally, then I'll step it down to 3 and a bit.
Yeah, because
Breaking then.
from the tip of my flight line, I use salmon tapers because it just goes.
Yeah.
And then I just build the leader then down to, on my dry, just normally frog at 2.8.
Yeah. There you go.
You got that nice green color.
Yeah, because although they kind of market leaders, don't they, as like the light presentation and things. Well, I just use that as as we all do, right, as the extension of the fly line, but starting to thin things down so it turns over nice and subtly. Yeah,
creating a nice whip.
Yeah, that's it.
That's what it's all about. And the thing is, if you get a little bit of a breeze, it picks up. You still got to get that little turnover on it.
Yeah, and it's surprising. You know yourself, Gav, with fish in the Usk, for example, it can be big in places. And fish quite spooky as well. So that longer leader, certainly as you get into dog days of summer, you do need the longer, trying to keep away. As Tim mentioned, I think on a recent one, longer leader, your fly line is maybe further away from the end of the fly or whatever. But it does help. And they do turn over quite nice if you've got a thicker leader. And you can keep that tippet quite thin as well then.
I have used Stroft quite a bit, and I'm impressed with it. It's okay.
Which version? They got a couple of different models, haven't they?
It's the monofilament. You got the one is monofilament. The other one is the GKR. Is the what's it called? It's the abrasive one.
ATM or AT something like that, is it?
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. That from what I've heard is a bit like do you see the supple flex stuff? So it's it can be a bit more slippy almost. So you need like an improved clinch knot or something like that with an extra. It's
more like the fluorocarbon.
Yeah.
Because that's very slippy.
Yeah.
You've got to use a grinner with it. So
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but the softer one is really good, and it gives you that little bit of a snake.
Yeah.
When you cast, the one doesn't. The one goes straight, which is the fluorocarbon. But the 80 whatever it is gives you that little bit of a snake, so not much softer. Yeah,
sometimes you want even if it's a couple of extra seconds of drag-free drift in it. That's
you got to have it. You got to have it.
Cool. Awesome.
Excellent.
Where are you going on the weekend?
So it's a place up by head up to Abergavenny, take the Hereford Road, you pass the Pandy Inn, or before you get to the Pandy Inn, you got to turn in there. You drive all the way up to a little place called Longtown. And that's where the campsite is. So as I said at the start, the Mono Rivers Association, it's just a charity really, but all the monies go back into the Mono system and catchment. So they've pretty much pulled a few favors, usually as they do every year. And yeah, we just have a weekend of fishing and weekend of hangovers, if I'm honest. So I always book the Monday off work as a catch-up day.
Well, you got it on there.
Excellent.
That's what it's all about.
You gotta have a bit of fun as well. It's not all about trout fishing, is it? So Well, most of it, but not always.
Mhm.
So okay, what I'll do then, guys, as normal, I'll send Del, just to check. Is there two groups on Facebook? Should I be using one over the other?
There's three. There's the main one,
Yeah.
and when I tried editing it, I created two groups.
Right.
So there's if you look at it, there's the main page, Facebook page, and there's two different groups. If you look at it, it'll say a group of Ludlow fly tie-in.
Right. Okay.
If you
Gotcha.
put it on the main one, I can share it to the other two.
Main group, is it? Right. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leave that with me. I've got the images sorted, so I'll pop them in, as well as the links as well that I mentioned for some of the patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could put it on the WhatsApp group as well, please.
Sure, no problem at all. So as normal then, thanks again for having me. I'm off fishing this weekend, so if there's any questions, message me next week.
Okay. Lovely. Cheers, mate.
Thank
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you ever so much. Cheers, mate.
Enjoy yourself.
Thanks, guys.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.